My name is Haley. I'm standing in the back office of my bustling bakery chain, the rhythmic hum of ovens and the sweet aroma of freshly baked goods filling the air. But right now, all I can focus on is the persistent ringing of my phone. The screen lights up with numbers I don't recognize, yet somehow, I know exactly who's on the other end. I let it ring, 5 minutes, 10, 30. I keep going about my business, frosting cakes, checking the ovens, signing invoices, pretending my hands aren't shaking. This sound takes me straight back to when I was 8 years old, sitting on a hard plastic chair in an orphanage, a tiny suitcase at my feet. The place smelled like bleach and old blankets, and I listened as adults promised they'd come back for me soon. But they never did. My mother took my older brother Ethan, and my father took my little sister, Lily. I was the one left behind, like an unwanted piece of luggage. For years, there was nothing. No calls, no letters, no birthday cards. It was as if I didn't exist to them. Then, I did a TV interview that went viral. An article told the world about the bakeries I'd built from scratch, and suddenly, the silence was broken. They all wanted back in, asking for explanations, forgiveness, a place at the table they'd once denied me. Before I tell you who called me that day and why I let the phone ring, let me take you back to the beginning. We used to live in a small town in Texas. Our house was a simple 2-story with a large front yard and an old oak tree in the back. My mother, Laura, was a nurse at the local hospital, and my father, Robert, was a mechanic. Ethan was the star student, always calm and collected. Lily was full of energy, with big blue eyes and a smile that could light up a room. And me, I was just in the middle, old enough to notice the changes in our family, but young enough to still believe in the power of love. Our family was like any other at first. Sunday dinners, family movie nights, and holidays filled with laughter. But then, my father lost his job. He tried to hide it at first, saying it was just a temporary setback. But as the weeks turned into months, the stress became palpable. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and arguments filled the air. I remember the night I realized how bad things were. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard my parents arguing in the living room. "We can't keep going like this," my mother said, her voice full of desperation. My father snapped back, "Then what do you suggest?" There was a long silence, and I knew something had changed. A week later, they sat us down at the kitchen table. They told us they were separating, trying to make it sound like it was for the best. They said it wasn't our fault, that they still loved us. But then came the real talk. My mother wanted Ethan with her because he was responsible and easy to manage. My father wanted Lily because she was so attached to him. Nobody mentioned my name. It was like I was an afterthought. That night, I heard my mother say to my father, "You take her. I can't handle another child right now." My father replied, "She's too emotional. I can't deal with that." And then, the words that would haunt me for years, just for a little while. "Maybe the foster home can take her until we get back on our feet." 2 days later, my mother packed my clothes into a duffel bag in a hurry. My father drove me to the foster home. They said it was temporary, that they'd come back for me soon. But as I watched them drive away, I knew deep down that they weren't coming back. The foster home was a big, old building with a long hallway and small rooms. The first night, I slept on a thin mattress that made a loud noise every time I moved. I kept my shoes on, hoping that my parents would come in the middle of the night to take me home. But they never did. The next morning, I sat by the window, waiting for their car to pull up. A volunteer came in with some supplies, and my heart skipped a beat, thinking it was my parents. But it wasn't. A caseworker, Mrs. Thompson, asked me to make a thank you card for my family. I wanted to tell her that she didn't understand, but I was too scared. So, I took the crayons and started drawing. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that my parents weren't coming back. The staff stopped saying "when your family comes back" and started saying "if there are updates." I learned to follow the rules at the foster home. Wake up early, make my bed, line up for meals, and don't ask too many questions. Sadness was a weakness here, and I didn't want to be a target. One of the girls in the home asked me on my 4th day, "Did they say they were coming back?" I nodded, and she just shrugged and said, "They always say that." After that, I stopped waiting by the window, but I still listened for footsteps, hoping it was my parents. Mrs. Thompson was kind. She asked me about my favorite things, but she never asked the one question I was dreading: why didn't they take you? She called my parents, left messages, and mailed forms, but there was no response. I later found out that my mother had moved in with a new boyfriend in another town with Ethan, and my father had moved in with his sister with Lily. They had moved on with their lives, leaving me behind. I was shuffled from one foster home to another. My first foster family was a couple with 2 kids of their own. They took me in for the money, and I felt like an outsider. My clothes were kept in a trash bag, and I slept on a couch in the living room. When their relatives came to visit, I was told to stay out of the way. My second foster home was chaotic. There were too many kids and not enough attention. Food was scarce, and privacy was non-existent. I changed schools again, and I always had a hard time answering when teachers asked where my home was. But then, I found my salvation in the kitchen. One of the foster homes sent me to help at a local community center on Saturdays. There, I met an old man named Mr. Jenkins. He was a retired chef, and he taught me everything about baking. He showed me how to measure ingredients, how to knead dough, and how to make the perfect loaf of bread. The first time I pulled a tray of cookies out of the oven, I was in awe. They were perfect, and it was because of me. Baking gave me a sense of control and purpose. I started volunteering at the community center as often as I could. Mr. Jenkins was tough on me. He corrected me when I made mistakes, but he also treated me like I had real potential. Around the same time, a school counselor, Miss Harris, noticed that I was different when it came to talking about the future. She asked me why I liked helping in the cafeteria. I told her I liked kitchens, and she said, "No, you like creating order, making things happen with your hands." Her words hit me hard because it was the first time someone saw me for who I was, not just a foster kid. Ms. Harris helped me get into a culinary program at a local vocational school. Mr. Jenkins helped me practice after school. I started waking up early to bake before school and wrote recipes in my notebooks during my free time. As I got older, I started catering small events. By the time I was 16, I had a small reputation in the community for my baked goods. At 17, Mr. Jenkins trusted me to run the bread station on my own. He told me, "You have a gift, Haley, but more importantly, you have discipline. Talent is nothing without discipline." I aged out of the foster system at 18. I had a duffel bag, a folder full of paperwork, and a scholarship to a community college's culinary program. I moved to San Diego and shared an apartment with 2 other girls. I worked at a diner in the morning and cleaned at a bakery at night. I did my homework on the bus and memorized inventory costs while waiting tables. I started selling my pastries at a farmer's market on the weekends. At first, it was just to pay for my textbooks and gas. But then, people started coming back, bringing their friends. They asked where my shop was, and I realized that I had a real chance at building something. That's when I met Lucy. She had a booth next to mine, selling handmade jewelry. She was a business-savvy woman, and she told me that I was undercharging for my pastries. She became my first real friend in adulthood. A few months later, I met Jake. He was an architect who came to the bakery where I worked at night. He ordered the same coffee and a croissant every day. One day, he asked who made the blueberry muffins, and when I told him it was me, he took a bite and closed his eyes in pure bliss. Jake was different. He was patient, kind, and he respected my boundaries. He liked my ambition and encouraged me to dream big. With Lucy's business advice and Jake's support, I started to plan for the future. I named my bakery Second Chances because I knew that some people get one chance at a good life, and I had to build my second one from scratch. I started with pop-up events, then private catering, and finally, I opened my first store. It was a small place, but it was mine. Business grew, and I opened more stores. I hired former foster kids because I knew what it was like to have no support. I wanted to give them a chance at a better life. The media started to take notice of my story. Newspapers wrote about me, calling me resilient and self-made. But behind the headlines, I knew the real story. Then, I did that TV interview. I was tired of hiding my past, so I told the truth about being left in foster care as a child. The clip went viral, and 3 days later, the calls started. The first voicemail was from Ethan. His voice was deeper, but I recognized it immediately. He said, "Haley, it's me. I know this is a shock. Please call me back. There's a lot you don't know." Then came Lily, crying as she said my name. My mother sounded old and full of regret, and my father's voice was weak. I let the calls ring. I knew they were only reaching out because of my success. They saw me as a source of help, not as their daughter. I had built a life for myself, and I wasn't going to let them come in and disrupt it. I finally agreed to meet them at my flagship store after hours. They arrived, looking a little lost. My father was thinner, and my mother's hands were shaking. Ethan was trying to be polite, and Lily looked at me with a mix of guilt and longing. We sat at the long communal table, and for a while, nobody knew what to say. My mother finally said, "You look beautiful." I almost laughed. I told them, "You didn't come here to talk about my looks. Start explaining." They started to make excuses. Ethan said they had all been through hard times. My father said he was overwhelmed and ashamed. My mother said she thought it was the best thing for me at the time. Lily cried and said she had only recently learned the truth. I stood up and went behind the counter. I came back with 4 folders full of my records from the foster system. I placed one in front of each of them and said, "You didn't lose me. You left me." I told them about the foster homes, the loneliness, the hunger, and the constant feeling of being unwanted. My mother started to cry, and my father stared at the papers in front of him. Ethan covered his face, and Lily sobbed. I then told them about Mr. Jenkins, Miss Harris, Lucy, and Jake. I told them that I had built my life with the help of strangers because my family had failed me. My father then said, "I'm sick, Haley. I don't have much time, and I want to make things right." Ethan admitted that he hoped I could help the family through this difficult time. I looked at each of them and said, "I didn't build this life so you could come back and use it. I set boundaries. I won't give you money or support. If there's any future contact, it will be on my terms." My mother flinched, and Lily nodded through her tears. I told them to tell the truth about what they had done, to stop hiding behind lies. After they left, Jake came in. He didn't ask how it went. He just opened his arms, and I walked into them. The calls and messages didn't stop right away. There were follow-up emails and letters. But I was firm. I had built a life for myself, and I wasn't going to let my past define me. These days, a portion of my bakery's quarterly profits goes to a foundation that helps young adults aging out of the foster system. I want to make sure that no child has to go through what I went through. Family isn't about blood, it's about who stays and who supports you when it matters most. I've forgiven my family for what they did, but that doesn't mean I'll let them back into my life without earning it. I've learned to listen to the little girl inside me, the one who was left behind, and I'll always protect her.